Second language acquisition normally takes place in a multilingual context. A multilingual context is a situation where people are well versed with two or more languages. This becomes more obvious in the context of world Englishes. World Englishes are learned by people all around the world in expanding and outer circle countries where people already know two or more languages, or people at least know one language, and then English is an additional language that they learn. The functions that an additional language performs in a multilingual context, for example, in a context where the users of a language have several languages in their linguistic repertoire, all these languages perform different functions, and the functions of the additional language are determined by the status or the importance that language is given in a particular speech community or in a particular context. So World Englishes performs various functions in different settings. For example, in some settings, English performs several important serious kind of functions. For example, it is the medium of education, it is used in politics, it is used in diplomacy, it is the language of employment, it is the official language of the courts, and the language of many other important domains. So in a country where it is given this kind of importance, where it is an official language, it will perform several functions, several serious functions. Whereas in countries where it is not an official language and is treated only as a foreign language, the functions it performs will be very limited. So the functions of an additional language are determined by the role and status of that language in a particular context. The field of world Englishes has been specially beneficial for SLA, for the study of second languages. It provides a very fertile ground for SLA research. For example, the observations and analyses of the acquisition of English or the learning of English in different socio-cultural settings gives SLA several new concepts, or identifies the strengths and weaknesses of existing SLA concepts. It also offers a lot of research ideas to the field of applied linguistics and sociolinguistics. So there's a lot of room for research in world Englishes or in the learning of different varieties of English in different sociocultural contexts. When we look at world Englishes in the context of second language acquisition, we see that there's a lack of relevance of many of these SLA concepts with world Englishes. For example, the concept of fossilization, that several learners stop short of attaining the native-like competency, or they are completely unable to attain that native-like competency, is a view which does not really which is not accepted by the world Englishes paradigm, because there are many situations where people are unable to attain several elements or linguistic elements, for not because they are not capable enough, but there are other reasons. There are socio-cultural reasons, and this also is a result of the influence of the other languages that people know. So they may not be able to pronounce certain words as well as, or the same way as the native speakers do, or they may not become used to using certain grammatical structures because of the influence of the frequency of use of a language structure which is different from native English structures, etc. So that doesn't mean that they are not capable of attaining better competence, better levels of competence, but it is only because of other reasons, several socio-cultural and other linguistic reasons. Similarly, interlanguage is a concept which which is not fully embraced by world Englishes. Again, interlanguage is the language that a learner has attained on his journey from the point where they start the learning a second language to the point where they can claim complete competence in the language. So the language in between these 2 points is the interlanguage. Again, interlanguage is considered deficient or full of errors and mistakes, etc. However, if we follow the world English's paradigm, the language which is considered interlanguage, or the stage which is, let's say, behind the ultimate attainment point of our target language, that may not be an interlanguage, but the kind of language that a learner of English is using as a result of, again, several socio-cultural factors. And it may not be this deficient or the phase of language where the learner is still going through the learning process and has not attained mastery in the language. The same is true of the input. The concept of input in World English's context, we know that many a time the input that the learners receive is completely based on non-native English, and if they receive any input in the native English, it's very restricted, and still the learner is able to learn English. The another concept that we have difficulty accepting in the context of world English is that of monitor, that when you learn a second language, you use the norms or the rules and principles of the first language as a monitor, and knowledge of these rules stops you from making mistakes or allows you to evaluate your own utterances. Again, in terms of monitor, what language or which variety of English do we use as the norm and to be used as a monitor. So all these SLA concepts, we see they are in a way contradiction. They contradict the world English's paradigm, or they do not completely get along with the world English's paradigm. So what we need to do is study second language acquisition for the impact that uses and functions of English can have on the attainment of a second language. So instead of making the native English competence as a target and studying the process of language acquisition with vis-a-vis norms and rules and principles of the native language, what we need to do in the light of world English's paradigm is to study language acquisition in the light of functions it performs in different contexts and the uses it has in different contexts for different people.